a long bone structure, just very briefly before we get into compact versus spongy bones. So a long bone, if we draw it, we want to get familiar with these terms. The central portion, so from here to here, this is called a diaphysis. And then at either end, so each long bone has two epiphyses, or epiphyses. Within this diaphysis, you should know we have, if I draw it a little bit wider, okay, so this would be like an epiphysis right there. Within this diaphysis, I've got this hollow center. And if you remember from hair, that hollow center, we already have a term for this, the medulla. So this is called the medullary cavity of the diaphysis of the long bone. So this is hollow. It's made up of, let me switch colors, yellow bone marrow, which is adipose tissue. So let me change that. Got this. And then we have this spongy bone, which we'll talk about soon. And then we have this thick, I'll keep that same color, this thick compound around the edges. Sorry, compact bone. So we have compact bone, and then deep to that we have this spongy bone, and then deep to that in the center of this diaphysis we have a medullary cavity, which is this hollow center, which is yellow bone marrow, being this lipid, this adipose tissue. We can give a name to this, so if this is closer to the trunk, or if like this is up towards the shoulder, if this was the humerus, then this would be your proximal epiphysis, and then your distal, so just some more of those lab regional terminology words. And here this is, the epiphysis is thin layer of this compact, and then spongy within the middle. And we'll talk about spongy and compact in just a second. The last thing you want to remember is that hyaline cartilage is on the articulating surfaces, so the ends here, we have this hyaline cartilage. Deep to that, we have the compact bone. Deep to that, we have this spongy bone. So just keep this in mind, because when we talk about endochondral ossification, we're going to see how we make all these things. How do we get from a cartilage template to that? All right, and then the last thing about a long bone, we have some membrane. So remember, we had this perichondrium surrounding cartilage back a few slides. Well, after this was hyaline cartilage, this was all hyaline cartilage, and now it's become bone. So now this surrounding layer of dense irregular connective tissue was the perichondrium, and now we call it the periosteum. So perichondrium becomes the periosteum. And that has two different layers, so if let's redraw this a little bit. Here's my long bone. I have my epiphyses and diaphyses. I have my medullary cavity, spongy bone, compact, spongy, hyaline cartilage, and then this periosteum. And we want to talk about the two layers of the periosteum. So this outer layer is called the fibrous periosteum. And this is that dense, irregular connective tissue. Remember, we went from a perichondrium, which was dense, irregular connective, and then we have this, so it's that same thing, this dense, irregular connective tissue layer. And then this inner layer is called the osteogenic layer. And osteogenic, osteo meaning bone, so this is a root word for bone. Genic meaning birth, so like Genesis, this is the creation of. So this is bone creation. So this osteogenic layer that's deep to this fibrous layer, this is where we'll get production of osteoblasts. and osteoclast. We'll talk about what those do a little bit later. Just some quick notes about what they do. Osteoblasts, these are bone building cells, and then osteoclasts, these are bone consuming, or these break down bones. So we'll say these consume bone or break them down. Okay. The last thing is we have one more membrane lining this medullary cavity. That's called the end osteum. So we have this periosteum that has two layers, the fibrous layer, the outer layer made of this dense regular connective tissue, because we went from perichondrium to periosteum, and then this inner osteogenic layer where we're getting the formation of these osteoblasts and osteoclasts, and then this inner lining layer, endo meaning lining, so this inner lining layer of the medullary cavity is called the endosteum. Cool. Alright, so we'll end there, and then this next video will go into the differences between compact and spongy bone. Really quickly before we end this sesamoid bone, I said I'd draw the patella. So if this was my patella, and I said this was my quad coming in like this, and then this was my calf, well, the patella has these two anchoring points of tendons like this. So that's all a sesamoid bone is, a bone embedded in muscle or tendon. So these are these tendons connecting the patella. Just remember that I didn't do that. So that's it for this video.